Hello, my name is Lowell, pronouns he, him, and I am the community manager for the Open Hearth Gaming Community. And this is our end of the year, game of the year episode that we've done every year for several years now. And I am joined by Sherri Stewart, who is the co-host of the former Gauntlet podcast. Sherri, thank you for coming on.
A joy, a pleasure, always.
And this is the episode where I abuse my position such that she and I can talk a little bit more than other people. But what's actually happening is this is a community-built project. We have submissions from community members, I think 36 or so, across a lot of different games. We've edited them and put them together, and they are in sort of 3 groups that you're about to hear. And in between, I'll give my choices, and Sherri will give her choices, sort of as the bridge between the 3 segments. So without further ado, we're going to move into our first segment.
Hi, I'm Dominik. I've been with Hearth since the beginning of 24, and I've run a ton of games in that time. But the game that I come to as my pick for the game of the year is a classic. It's an old one. It's Apocalypse Keys by fellow Hearthy Rae Nedjadi. I started playing a quarterly that then evolved into a full run that is still ongoing. And the reason for that is that I find its writing amazing. You know, there is this old joke in PBTA and Forge in the Dark games that the full success is the worst result because there is nothing going off of it. You know, in many PBTA games, the full success is you succeed, full stop. Or the miss is you miss, take an XP, full stop. In Apocalypse Keys, it is so maximalist in its writing that you always get a prompt. You always have a very concrete idea of what is the result of this roll. There is no moment where you sit down and your player rolls a mixed success or a miss, and you're sitting like, what is that complication that I'm supposed to pull out of my back pocket right now? I have no idea. That just doesn't happen. The game always tells you what happens. And as a GM, that makes my life so much easier. Also, it is very, very forward when it comes to engaging players as world builders, in that there are so many instances where a move says, player, you think of something now. For example, just because today I built a character with a new player of the Betrayed, and there's this move that says basically, you know that somebody has a guilty conscience, and you, the player, get to tell me, the GM, or the entire table, I guess, who that NPC is and what they feel guilty about. That's amazing. And the other reason why I really, really like Apocalypse Keys in a way that I haven't liked a game in a long time is that there's a very tight coupling between the rules and the philosophy undergirding these rules. Particularly, I want to say just a few words to the resolution mechanic. It being a PBTA game, it uses the mixed success, full success tier system. Only here, the good result, the one that you want, is not the 12 plus. The result that you want is the modest 8 to 10. You don't want excess. You want moderation. Because excess usually means that somebody else gets hurt. And I really like that about it. That in a game that in its text and also in its subtext is very specifically anti-capitalist, also picks that theme up in its rules design. Where classic PBTA games are totally caught in a capitalist logic of more is better. If you don't succeed, it's because you are just not good enough, or you haven't tried hard enough, or you weren't lucky enough. In Apocalypse Keys, if you don't succeed, it's because maybe you were a bit too timid. You didn't use enough darkness tokens. But then on the other hand, the miss is usually less catastrophic than the catastrophic success. If you really want to succeed, you spend the darkness tokens. And you do that knowing that if you do succeed and you overshoot the mark, other people likely will suffer. Maybe you, but more likely other people. In any way, there won't be no success without anybody suffering, because that is the result of moderation. And this is a game that I think really, really introduces a paradigm shift into the PBTA family of games that has been maybe not precisely overlooked, because that is usually the first thing everybody talks about when they talk about Apocalypse Keys, and that it's so cool and awesome. But I think it hasn't been appreciated in how radical that change is on this deeper philosophical level. That it is a bit, let's say, strange to create a game that on its face is anti-capitalist, is a game about resistance, and then use the exact same logic that undergirds the capitalist system, the logic of maximalism, the logic of trying harder, being more, and not giving a damn about who gets hurt. And Apocalypse Keys, very consciously, I think, thinks about what that means on a mechanical level, but also on a play level.
Hi, my name is Rae. My pronouns are he and they. And my game of the year is Harvest by Luke Jordan. I've been really looking forward to this game. I pretty much love any game that Luke works on, but Harvest I was very excited about because of its folk horror themes and its exploration of personal horror versus community horror versus the horror of colonialism versus the horror of history and time encroaching. I've had so much fun playing this game because I talk about it like there are very big themes and ideas, of which there are. They're very large ideas and themes, but they become very personal and they become razor edge sharp. The tension in the game is so good because you are struggling not only as your playbook, you choose if you are the wise one, the old name, the homecomer, so on, but you also have to choose a horror that is attached to you. So, for example, when I was playing the wise one, I had to choose if I was going to be the stone in the marsh, the ravening wolf, or the skinless mare. And so all of the different possibilities per playbook really shifts, considering what horror you choose that eats away at you, that is part of the island that you are on, that is demanding from ancient times, from a place of sacrifice. It is power that you are given that can make things easier, but it is a very dangerous power that will erode a part of your humanity. I realize as I say it out loud, it sounds obvious why I would love this game. These are themes that I love to explore myself in my own games, but Luke does it so differently, and it's so fascinating. I've been playing the game with Casey, Kim, and Scott, and what's really been fun is the way our playbooks, our moves will like intersect with each other, almost like the moves are drawn to each other to create an amazing amount of impact that's either really emotionally resonant, really sad in terms of what the island is losing or could lose, but also really dangerous. One of my favorite examples was Casey's character doing a move to like create a blood oath between our characters, but I use that to trigger my own ravening wolf move of sacrificing blood to transform into a wolf, which I had to unlock. There's also a cool thing about this game is that it is a belonging outside belonging game, but there are fun ways you have to unlock parts of your playbook that come from both the number of tokens you sacrifice, but also certain quests that you have to go on. So certain narrative things that you have to do that are all horrible that I love in order to unlock more. And yeah, there's so much to love. So basically, I love Harvest because it's so thematically rich, it's so mechanically interesting, and it pushes you into very deep and resonant spaces. And after every game, I'm thinking about it for hours, if not days. So yeah, it's my game of the year for sure.
Hi all, I'm Ides of March on Discord. I've played, GM'd and or facilitated roughly 90 or so games this year, 36 of those were new systems to me, so choosing a game of the year was particularly hard. I'm going to cheat by mentioning more than just one game, but my game of the year was Last Train to Bremen by Carlo Acercion. I facilitated Last Train twice this year, and it was spectacular each time. It's a GM-less storytelling game about a dysfunctional band of lowlifes. It uses rules based on liar's dice to facilitate telling a despicable tale of secrets, tension, backstabbing, and betrayal. What more could you ask for? On both occasions, we had lots of post-game chat, and one player even wrote an in-world play report using newspaper and magazine articles, and even mocked up some album covers. It was great, and if playing a messed-up musician and leaning into rock and roll excesses sounds fun to you, then definitely give it a go. 2 close runners-up for Game of the Year were Saltfish and Almanacs from Story Brewers and Alice is Missing from Spencer Stark. I played Saltfish over 2 sessions, and it was such a lovely storytelling game about relationships and introspection, with a veneer of being merchants on our yearly tour of towns to buy and sell wares. Alice is Missing is well known, but I won't go into any detail, just to say that it's such a powerful and unique experience. It still sends a little shiver down my spine when I think about it. 3 honourable mentions are Sleep Away by J Dragon, a belonging outside belonging game of teenage counsellors at a summer camp. I played it over 3 sessions and really enjoyed the system and setting. One goal for next year is to play many, many more belonging outside belonging games. I'm looking at you, Harvest. Another honourable mention is Good Society by Storybrewers. I'm playing it in an ongoing campaign of Emma, Forget Me Not, an expansion of the base game, and I'm loving it. The focus on interpersonal relationships and drama, the token system, the writing of letters, I'm loving it all. It's really hitting my RPG drama spot. And finally, the game I'm most looking forward to running next year is Ex Tenebris by Black Armada Games. I've GM'd the Quick Start 4 times. It's been excellent every single time. I love the gothic horror sci-fi setting, the development of the emergent mystery system, and I'm looking forward to getting my hands on the full books in the later half of 2026 to run a campaign. See ya.
Hi, my name is Horst, and before I reveal my favorite game of 2025, I would like to mention that the last year for me was the year of the play-by-post. I ran a very dedicated group of amazing players through the first duty station of Night Witches, and the game had everything I want from a game of Night Witches. Exhaustion and scarcity, difficult choices, do I sleep and remove the stress, or do I repair my plane? Moral dilemmas, tender moments of intimacy, tense aerial combat, and notable PCs and NPCs that I still remember. I also played parts of my ongoing Mythic Bastionland campaign as a play-by-post, most notably a political and diplomatic game that was set during Septimass, which is a gathering of local rulers who are supposed to pledge allegiance to the king. And it started in the 3rd post. We already had Chekhov's dagger in the belt of a troubled young squire. We had 2 court dramas, and one of them ended in a trial by combat at dawn, where one of the PCs faced their kind of nemesis, finishing a story arc that started in a play-by-post approximately a year ago. Well, what is my favorite game of 2025? I mean, call me boring. I would call myself dedicated after finding my perfect game. It is, for the 3rd time in 3 years, Mythic Bastionland by Chris McDowell.
Hi there, I'm Marc from Major Arcana, and my game of the year was going to be Triangle Agency. It's awesome. We had a great time with it, and I'm definitely going to be running it again next year, but I'm positive someone else is probably going to pick it, so it might be like the quote unquote game of the year, but my number one play of the year has got to be our year-long campaign of Ultraviolet Grasslands. We're using a synthetic dream machine, or it used to be CCATS, the system that came with it. But yeah, it took me a while to figure out what I was going to run it in, because OSR is fine sometimes, but it doesn't really hit for me all the time. And for a setting so rich and involved like this, it was really nice to have something that meshed with it and was designed for it. And STM just really hits a sweet spot, I think, for us. So the idea was to start it up in January as a quarterly. We'd get some players in to make their heroes, build a caravan, head out from the Violet City out through the Grasslands for a little bit, and get a little taste of the whole setting. And we are still playing. We just finished session 40 or 41, and we have to wrap it up at the end of December. A lot of things going on, but it's just been fantastic. We only had, I think, one player. I think Mike has been the only one who has stayed through it the entire time. But we've had probably a dozen or so players pop in and out over the course of it. It's been really cool to see how the caravan and the group changes, just heading out west and seeing what happens with our own little motivations. Yeah, it's a crazy good time. The setting is wild. We just pulled into the Black City at the end of the world, and this last month is going to be even stranger than all the other ones, and they have been pretty strange. So yeah, if you've been wanting to try out Ultraviolet Grasslands, I highly recommend it. I'm probably going to run it again at some point. I just need to take a little break to get other stuff in. But yeah, good year. Till next time, I'll see you in the Vastlands.
Hi, I'm Madeline Colley, Mads for short, they, them. And while I've tried new games and revisited old favorites this year, it's been tough to make my pick for Game of the Year 2025. I know it's a subjective choice, but I always want to make this decision based on the actual game, and not because of my fabulous experience at table, mainly because of my fellow players. That said, I have to return to one of my original loves, Trophy Dark. For those unfamiliar, Trophy Dark by Jesse Ross is a role-playing game adapted from Graham Walmsley's Cthulhu Dark, and also based in Blades in the Dark by John Harper. For my more fundamental review of the game, you can check out my entry for Game of the Year 2023 with Open Hearth. This is more of a specific dive given the incursions I've run or written in this past year. One of my joys is introducing Dark to those new to the game. 5 rings in the character's journey to the incursion goal, each ring with their own terrors and temptations. Ring 1 is just dropping the characters in the world and seeing how they deal with it, and Ring 2 drags them in deeper. By the end of Ring 3, new players start to get it. This is that horror story of treasure hunters meeting tragic ends in a haunted forest that doesn't want them there. An A24 movie that the characters are living in. Twists of suspicion and hints of impending doom loom over them, especially as Ring 4 ramps up the tension with actual monsters chasing the characters or really making the situation dire. Ring 5 brings them so close to their goal, for a price. And the beauty of this game is the frequent player engagement, from the presentation of Devil's Bargains, what will happen no matter what regardless of dice roll results, to their narrative control over how their characters end, and with epilogues. Moments of atmosphere and mood help immersion into the world the characters are exploring, and conditions laid on the characters will flavor roleplay from that point onward. Speak the Skies incursion No Fear has a glossary for modern mountain climbing features to help with descriptions of obstacles the characters will come across. And their incursion The Devil of High Rock, from the same anthology of Trophy Dark games, gives more of a fantasy village folk horror feel, and plays on the characters' doubts and fears up through the twist at the end. I had the great pleasure and privilege helping James L. Smith playtest his pulp sci-fi incursion Adrift, of mutinous soldiers exiled on an unsuitable planet, and the theme of alienation was met in every nook and cranny of its rings. My holiday go-to, North Pole Land by Ember and Ash, brings in more of the darkness behind the season and takes an almost mythic quality as the characters persevere in their search for the missing Santa. I found playability proven through my own incursion, The Lovely Somnolent, based on the Briar Rose fairy tale. No matter how many times I've run it, with the same moments and prompts, Each table surprises me with their responses, different each time as they work through each ring to their inevitable doomed conclusion, lost to the haunted forest or forever changed. Whether it be through core Trophy Dark incursions or third-party material, I am always delighted with this game as the gift that keeps on giving. The vibes, the simplicity of the mechanics, and the collaborative narrative created by keeper and players for an incredible story enjoyed by all at the end. Welcome to the forest.
Hello, my name is Anders Gabrielsson, and my game of the year is the Sentinel Comics role-playing game. This is a game that I have owned for a long time, and I've barely gotten to play it. But this year, for the Open Hearth weekend, Mike ran a character creation session with a little bit of play tacked on back at the end. And that reminded me of how much I love this game. In my opinion, it is the best action-oriented Supers role-playing game. It gets how comics work. It gets how superhero fights, what makes them fun and interesting. And I think it does a great job of just emulating superhero characters in a fun and interesting ways. All characters feel different, they play different, and it's easy to make characters and to make interesting and different characters. That's it. That's my pick for Game of the Year this year.
Hello, I'm Kieron Gillan. I've been on Open Hearth for quite a while now. I'm a relatively slow member. I've only played a handful of games this year, but they've all been delightful. Thank you for having me. I love being part of the community and hearing what everyone else does, and it really leaves me rejuvenated. You give me life. I am mainly playing a few games on the Gauntlet this year, plus various ones off, and it's just been a good year. I've been blogging about games again on a site called All Men Running the World with my friend Jim Rosignol, the co-designer of Teeth. I was trying to think what is my favourite game of the year, and I was thinking maybe it's the Scions, the game I'm working on, which is a kind of Paragon system hack, which is kind of do your own Horus Heresy at home. Or maybe it's The Between, which is a game I GM'd and was found really challenging and interesting and dramatic. I'm halfway through Mythic Bastionland at the moment. And, I love this game. I love this so much. But then I thought about something slightly different. Halfway through the year, J Dragon and company descended upon my town of Bath, played a playtest of 7-Part Pact, the game of wizards, which is kind of Wizards of Earthsea meets Amber, meets Sandman, meets a lot of other fun stuff. And it was a week game. We played in person with long sessions. It was quite a lot of hours. It was dramatic and incredibly GM-ful in terms of the amount of systems flying around. It was wonderful being part of the playtest and something very unlike anything else I'd ever played, which of course is part of the fun sometimes. So if I kind of think back to the year, I think I'll probably think that's the year I played 7-Part Pact. And that says something. Looking forward to what everyone else is playing and hopefully see everyone soon.
G'day everyone, Mike here from just west of nowhere. I played a ton of great games this year, but the one that I want to name Game of the Year for me is The Watch by Ash Kreider. We played 5 sessions of this through the month of August, and it feels like we played a lot more than that. We had great characters with meaningful relationships, we had fist-pumping moments of epic victory and heartbreaking moments of bitter defeat. Our facilitator Shane really highlighted the insidious nature of the shadow we struggled against, having it infiltrate and corrupt at least as often as it struck with sudden and terrible force. The game itself does a fantastic job of keeping the spotlight on the impact that constant struggle has on the people who suffer through it, and the importance of sharing that burden in healthy, and sometimes unhealthy, ways. The players all brought tragically flawed characters to the table, and it was extremely cathartic to watch them grow from a group of individual misfits into a cohesive unit. We only played a third or so of their campaign, and I would love to do a complete run of it in 2026. So if you see it on the calendar, I hope to see you around the campfire.
Hello, everyone, and happy holidays. This is retired game retailer and current public librarian Jim Crocker, aka Jim Likes Games on Itch and Discord. Various life events meant I played a lot fewer games this year than I have in nearly 3 decades, but it was still hard to make the cuts. So, at the risk of repeating myself, my game of the year was the Band of Blades series I'm facilitating on Open Hearth. We're about halfway through, and if things proceed as they have so far, you'll probably be able to just reuse this audio again next year. Lowell was very kind in praising my game running on a recent Around the Hearth episode, but when I've got a murderer's row of collaborators that includes some of my favorite players in any of my games, it really does make my job much easier than it looks. This is the 4th full campaign of Band of Blades I've facilitated, and I've been a player through completion in 2 more, and I don't see myself getting bored with it anytime soon. It's a potent and stunningly well-balanced mix of strategy, tactics, horror, action, and melodrama wrapped in my favorite implementation of Forged in the Dark. If that sounds like fun, just hang around until late next year when I inevitably sigh, shake my head, apologize to all the fancy new unplayed games on my shelf, and list another series of it. Here's to a great year of gaming for all of us.
Hello, friends and enemies. It's Sean F. Smith, and this year, my game of the year is the first one in that it's original Dungeons & Dragons. Partially because the scene around OD&D is a lot more weird and expansive, and that it's playing around in the gaps compared to a lot of other OSR titles. There's quite a lot of those that have become increasingly siloed and have produced some really solid output, but so much of that has been drilling down into their own particular preferred forms. Whereas a lot of people who are then going back looking at the original 3 booklets, it's nonsense. It's a text that's written as a reference with the assumption that you already know how to play. So there's a lot of ambiguity in there, and the ambiguity itself is really interesting. The text itself is very minimal and evocative at the same point. And so it's really quite useful to play with. Of all of the people in the scene that's currently writing, I'm a big fan of the stuff that I'm seeing put out from Castle Grief. His both like solo adventures and world building, and the way in which he's interacting with the original texts and creating his own ones with a very specific, distinct DIY aesthetic are really quite compelling. And it's really giving me some excitement to think about the different ways in which fantasy and science fiction intersect. One thing that's easily missed from the very early books is that you've got robots and Martians right there at the beginning before fantasy and sci-fi get kind of like sequestered off apart from each other. And so having something quite so weird and all-encompassing is great. And it's really nice to bring around with you because there's not need for an absurdly wide variety of dice. So as somebody who wants to play a strategic and tactical-minded game, not having to bring a full set of polyhedrals and instead just being able to bring a handful of D20s and a load of D6, that's why original D&D is my game of the year. Have great holidays.
Hello, I am Tiamat. I just go by T, she, her. And I am actually new to the Hearth this year. I'm a newbie. And perhaps as a result, my game of the year is not actually one that I played on the Hearth, but this has very much for me been the year of Sundered Isles, which is an expansion for Ironsworn: Starforged by Sean Tompkin. Starforged takes a sort of Ironsworn engine and puts it in a space opera setting. And then Sundered Isles takes that same sort of general mechanic and makes it a nautical Age of Sail pirate setting, and explicitly an anti-imperialist one. And the group that I'm playing with is running it as a GM-less game. So the 3 of us are collaboratively building the world, deciding what happens, and relying very heavily, of course, on the oracles, which are the tables that allow you to randomly generate everything from character and location names to faction goals. One of the oracles that I really like in Sundered Isles is one for downtime activities. Interludes is what they're called. So you can find out what your characters are up to on your long voyages. And something that I have really been enjoying with this game is I've probably spent about as much time writing fiction in this setting as I have actually at the table, as a way to continue to explore and elaborate, also using the oracles. And one of the other players is a visual artist and has likewise been really exploring the setting visually. And it's been really wonderful to have time at the table actually playing, and then all of these other enriching activities and artistic pursuits around it that come back and get folded back into what we play. And I will say, I think that if you are coming from more of a trad D&D perhaps background and you're interested in trying a GM-less system, I do think that Sundered Isles or Starforge or Ironborn is a good one to pick because there are a lot of mechanisms and functional rules and machinery around helping to tell the story and do the things that a GM would do in a way that helps create momentum a little bit more easily than just having a bunch of people sit down and be like, all right, make something up, which I know can be pretty intimidating. So, and if you are interested in running it online, I would definitely recommend the Foundry game system by Ben Straub, which will save you a ton of time flipping through pages and rolling on roll tables. And I have found it to be a very smooth playing experience. So shout out to the open source community. So that's my game of the year, Sundered Isles.
Hello, I am Danny, aka Ferret, as most of you know me by. This year of TTRPGs, I think my favorite game has to be Promethean the Created. I am cheating a bit because it did start about this time in 2024, but it ended in 2025, and the majority of the game took place in 2025. It is a touching cornerstone of humanity in the Chronicles of Darkness space where I helped these three homuncular Frankenstein-esque creations through their lives until they discovered humanity. And I think at the end, I wrote out 15 pieces of different things for the epilogue, only used 13 of them. So I may have achieved them out of some things, but by the last 2 months stretch, I don't think there was a session where someone was not crying, including me, at the end of that game.
Well, those were spectacular choices, weren't they, Sherri?
I couldn't agree more.
So, Sherri, now for you, what's going to be your game of the year here? We've talked a little bit about this, but I don't think you've given me any real sense of what you're going to pick here.
It is. It has been a very hard year to make that choice because we've played a lot of really good games and good games in really different ways. Like some of them, it was 100% just the players falling into a rhythm and bringing something beautiful forward. And other times it was a marvelous story that I just can't stop thinking of. And we hit some systems that surprised us a lot and delighted us in ways. So it's that sort of thing of figuring out what it is that I want to point to. Runner up is because it's something that I can't really share with anyone else, but that I had a lovely time with. And it was a game that my friend Rae Nedjadi wrote around Christmas for a small group of regular players that they play for. It's in playtest, but it's more of a play to figure out if this kind of game will work. And it was a really interesting, I don't know how to describe it, but we were making it up as we went along. But the big idea about it was that it was this very magical noir furry story, which sounds, like it's going to be, I don't know what you think it's going to be, but it was really, really fantastic in the sense of fantasy and in the sense of just the oddest stories that just had a dreamlike quality. Everything had a very dreamlike quality to it. And because it was noir, it was sort of a dark and rainy dreamlike quality. It was so striking all the way through it. You were thinking about the game during parts of it, but then other times you were just playing. It had that sort of flipping between the natural and the Ludo part of the game.
Fair enough.
If it makes any sense.
Yeah.
But it was a pleasure because it was with friends who were familiar with one another. I don't know how to describe it to anyone else, but it was a very personal game thing. So I have to put that for myself. For me, it was super important. And the thing of like playtesting a game that's so early on in its stages where you're making, like your suggestions end up being part of the game.
And your big pick then, if that's your runner up?
We played a couple of other games. Sunken Hearts, fabulous, all the way through. I've mentioned it before. I'll keep on mentioning it until you actually get it into the form that you're going to put it into, but it's an awesome PBTA mess that is going to be kind of evocative of the Changeling, the game. The other thing that we played a chunk of was your hack of Girl by Moonlight. Sorry, your hack of Girl by Moonlight for school, for magical schools, the Scholomance. We started that game, and it's all good. I'm putting it there because I've started that game before. I know what's coming, but just the amount of building that's gone into it with other players already, it's very exciting. Like, I'm ready to go. We've had 2 episodes and there's going to be more. But the big one is it has to be Die, because of the group that we got and the story that we ended up with. And yeah, that is a great game about really messed up adults getting pushed back into a world that they remember, that they know about from playing games, role-playing games, and what they do in that world, a world that is pretty much helpless before them in a lot of ways. And wow, you get a good group working on that, and it just will follow you for the end of your days. And this group this year was amazing. So I don't know what else to say, except if you get a chance to play Die with a good group and some people who can really lean into being a certain kind of person, being that kind of person, who are you going to get some good play?
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sherri. Now we're going to move on to our second segment.
My name is Jesse Ableman. My game of the year for 2025 is Luke Jordan of Games from the Wildwoods' Harvest. Harvest is a stupendously effective game about an island where a sacrifice must be made and how it affects the people who live there. It's a belonging outside belonging, GM-less game. Just an incredible experience this year playing it with a couple folks on the hearth. There's a lot to say about it. I'll just say I loved it. You should pick it up and have a great time.
Hi, my name is Will H, and I've been with the Open Hearth since about 2017. So much like last year, I haven't played as many games as I'd like, but I've done more of the things that I do like, so I can hardly complain. But from what I have played, my honorable mention is going to be Seasons 2 and 3 of Star Trek Adventures Kintsugi, where we're building even more of the shared Hearth Star Trek continuity. You should all get involved, join the waitlist, it's great. But given that was my choice last year, I think it's going to have to be different this year, and my game this year is going to be our long-running, multi-format campaign of Mythic Bastionland. It's been going for a little over a year now. We've done a quarterly, we've done a couple of limited series. We filled the gaps in between with the play-by-posts. Over the course of our adventures, our brave knights have competed in tourneys, slain cursed beasts, ended malicious cults, and found themselves entangled in the politics of the realm and all the scars of the war that went before. So much of what I love about this game is down to the players at the table and the GM, like so many games. But now that I've actually read the game itself, I can see how much of that's also owed to the evocative tables, the material provided by Chris McDowell, and the rules itself. The combat is fascinating. It's somehow manages to, despite having this extremely abstract version, allow you to come up with brilliant descriptions of some fairly brutal fights. It always feels as though danger is in the balance, even though you are quite powerful when it works out in your favor. But sometimes, the dice go wrong and you end up with your strongest fighter having his arm crippled. But, it's not really a game about the fighting. It's a game about coming across weird things in weird places and trying to work out what weird thing you should do with them. I play a very simple character. I play a character that's just sworn to honor, to loyalty, the realm. And somehow it's still always really interesting to play. I've got my own little squire, Zoltan, and Perry Lake the Gilded Knight has been one of my favourite characters to play, largely because of his band of brothers, the Brotherhood of the Black Fur, and because of the GM, who I'll name here and embarrass him thoroughly, I'm sure, but Horst runs an amazing game of Mythic Bastionland, as he does for everything else. And I really recommend that if you're curious about Mythic Bastionland, you should check out his excellent podcast, The Smiling Fox. All I'll leave you with is do not trust the Smiling Fox. We've yet to meet him. Have fun, guys.
Hi, I'm Wyllora, and my game of the year is Triangle Agency. With the amount I played and ran and played with it, it really couldn't not be. It's the game that got me back into GMing, because the way it's set up just clicks in my brain in a way that makes prepping and idle dreaming about the game just a genuine delight. I'm so normal about this game all the time. If you don't know about Triangle Agency, it's a corporate horror game of investigating and capturing supernatural anomalies at the behest of the evil, extremely benevolent corporation that employs you. The PCs are resonants, meaning they are formerly mundane individuals who bonded to one of these scary supernatural phenomena. And the game is weird. It doesn't operate how you expect it to, and it can be challenging to adjust. You have to meet it where it's at and not try to make it be any other game than what it is. The mechanics are deeply tied to the themes of the game, one of which is who gets the power to change the world. The only way to affect the reality of the game is to change reality supernaturally, through either your own anomaly's power or the agency's. Or is it? Non sequitur, I will talk about how this game has spoilers, legitimately, and it is rules, and lore, and more. I found it thrilling to have the game surprise you as it develops, and this tension between curiosity and wanting to keep the mystery of what you weren't allowed to read yet. And I advocate for keeping that mystery, for the most part. But even now as a GM, having read most of the book, it still has so much I'm excited to be surprised by, since it's gonna look different every time it comes up in play. The tone can rapidly change from horror to comedy and back again. I've laughed my ass off and also had really deep, meaningful storylines emerge. Shout out to Elliot, Marc F, Marc M, and Will S. Sorry to severance your names. But for the quarterly game we played this spring, incredible stuff. I still think about each of those characters and the overall storyline that Elliot and the game helped us create. The abilities and the other components of character creation are completely different in the hands of different players. I love when character creation is combining two or more things in different configurations. I don't know how else to put it. But anyways, the abilities, they're all about creative, weird, silly use cases. I feel like the game overall is this joyful celebration of creativity while pretending with a wink and a nudge that it's restricting you. And it's about that friction, about rules and games and real life and why we follow them, and why and when we break them. When accepting best rules at the Ennies this year, one of the designers, Sean Ireland, said that through the lens of rules, this game goes out to anybody who has ever forced to put any part of themselves in a box for any reason. And that really touched me, and I think it sums up why I connect with this game so much. This is a work of art, highly playable work of art that couldn't have taken any other form than a tabletop role-playing game, and I think that's awesome.
Casey here, going to talk to you about Yazeba's Bed and Breakfast again. So this is the second full year of running the game in the community, and I ran a little bit less this year, but it's been really good. It's continued to be amazing. We managed to play some of the late chapters with some regulars and close friends to really explore the emotional depth of those late chapters and push out into what could be very unsafe territory to kind of meet it where it's at with those chapters. And that's been a ton of fun to explore that kind of play and really kind of get all of the depth that we could out of those characters in those chapters. The other thing that we've been doing is some of those late chapters also have some pretty wild mechanics or have pushed me to do things experimental or that I probably wouldn't, like running Day at the Beach for 8 or 9 players all at the same time was quite a challenge. But we also set up the Zoom meeting to have breakout rooms for all the different activities and like mechanical situations for the chapter. So people were able to kind of move from room to room the same way you would move from getting snacks to going swimming to trying to surf to beach combing if you were at the beach with your friends. And that was a really amazing, fun, rewarding experience for sure. The thing about that I think was probably the coolest thing was that for over 100 sessions, I think we're at 105 now, I've been in every session. I've been kind of the common thread as the concierge. I've seen everything, I've heard everything, all of the continuity lives in my brain. But with that day at the beach session, with people being in different rooms and doing different things, there were things happening and stuff going on that I wasn't aware of. And I didn't hear all of the stories from that session. And so there are now secrets in the game, even from me. And I think that's pretty spectacular. We also did Chapter 95, Bonfire, which is kind of a big community gathering, talent show kind of thing. We had a bunch of people show up for that too. Some first-timers, some long-timers. It was awesome. Thank you to everyone who showed up and displayed an actual personal talent. That takes a lot of guts. I'm glad you were brave enough to do that. At the end of that chapter, Sal gets to say goodnight to everyone and spend tokens to speak to his community. At the end of that chapter, I spent all of my tokens in the following ways that I would like to share with everyone. Spend 1 token. Express an earnest love for everyone present and a desire to protect them from the world's heartbreaks. Everyone may doodle a heart somewhere on their character sheet. Spend 3 tokens to comment on the bittersweet passage of time and excitement for what we'll do in the future. Everyone may doodle a star somewhere on their character sheet. Spend 5 tokens and revel in the energy of being surrounded by so many bright and talented people. The bed and breakfast gets a bag of popcorn. Spend 7 tokens and speak of the awe of being truly held by your community, and the bed and breakfast gets a bottle of champagne. I really couldn't have got to this point without everybody's help along the way. So thank you. Thank you for visiting the bed and breakfast and for playing with us.
Hello, this is Mike Ferdinando. I'm having a very hard time narrowing down my game of the year for 2025. And this year's gaming was great. Some highlights include a cathartic and bittersweet end to a public access campaign, running an amazing session of Trophy Gold at Strategicon Gateway for a table of game designers who'd never played Trophy before, and playing a retired superhero who got dragged back into Cape life in an absolutely joyful campaign of X-Capes. But my game of the year goes to a year-long campaign of the Ultraviolet Grasslands. GM of that game has been Marc Majcher, and he's fantastic. Marc ran this game through Open Hearth. He originally offered this game as a 12-session quarterly back in January, and we were all having such a fun time with this game that he just kept adding sessions. We are up to 42 as I'm making this recording. So this was an open table game, so we didn't always have the same cast of characters every session, but I managed to be one of the 3 core players who attended at least half of all of the 40 sessions. For those unfamiliar, UVG is a weird science fantasy point crawl adventure where the player characters form a caravan and travel from Violet City, the last bastion of civilization, across a vast and strange steppeland to the mysterious Black City far to the west. I decided to roll up my character randomly, and I played Phaedrid, an advertising engineer and practicing magic technical wizard looking to open new markets for his company's Dream Magic subscription service. He teamed up with a shape-shifting protocol golem and a charismatic legume dealer to form a trading company. And then we headed west. From a game mechanics perspective, we used the UVG in-house OSR-ish rule set Synthetic Dream Machine. It's a simple D20 roll high system that has just enough complexity and nuance to make it get interesting. The game also presents a resource management minigame for the weeks of travel between points on the map. Normally, I find keeping track of inventory to be about as much fun as watching grass grow, but somehow this version made it fun and compelling. Keeping track of the time and supplies while on a journey of many weeks added a lot of tension and drama to the game. Another clever thing about the game system, your characters advance by having experiences, meeting people, exploring new places, and carousing. The carousing system is this game's answer to the XP for gold thing that's in so many OSR games. At each location, you can choose to go out partying, roll a die, consult the location's carousing table, and multiply by the location's carousing factor, which is usually 100. Spend that much gold and gain that many XP. The UVG book itself presents an anti-canon setting with 36 major locations on a sprawling map, each with a bunch of additional locations and specific things to explore. Many of these places are described in just an inspiring sentence or two. The GM is expected to riff on these broad strokes, possibly using the book's oracle tables, and then build an emergent narrative out of what the PCs experience. And the story we wove was strange and wondrous. I never knew exactly what our characters were going to run across in a given game session, but I always knew that we would be in for a delightful time, especially given Marc's extremely capable GMing skills. So, Game of the Year 2025, Synthetic Dream Machine, and the Ultraviolet Grasslands.
Hello, my name is Alun. My pronouns are he, him, and I've been a member of this community since about 2019. It's been a funny old year for me, in as much as work has interfered with both my availability to run and play much this year. But within those limits, my games of the year are going to fall into two categories, as a player and as a GM. As a player, I played a lot of Handmaster for the first time in quite a while, proper gritty, hit locations, detailed sailing rules, the whole shebang. My thanks to Andy for running that face-to-face for some of us Harniacs. But then what else have I played? Lovecraft-esque, second edition, really smart second edition. Not just reboxed and re-illustrated, really takes the structure of the first edition and really polishes it to a really sparkly gem. So that's a lead candidate, I guess. The other candidate would be Kieron's, what did he call it? Scions, a grimdark paragon game on a galactic scale. Great fun. I would love to play that again once it's playtest and is a bit more robust around the edges, but we had great fun playing it. So it's in there just because it was so much fun as a candidate. But I think as a player, my lead candidate for Game of the Year is probably going to have to be Star Trek Adventures, Lowell's third season of the USS Kintsugi. I like to think that fans demanded the return of Commander Letal, the Tellarite everyone loves to hate, after he was missing from season 2. And so he came back as a guest star in season 3. And that has been a joy to play in a fantastic group in which all the interactions that I had as Letal were just a joy. So my thanks to the players and to Lowell for running that. So that, I think, is my lead candidate Game of the Year from a player perspective. Apart from the fact that I've really enjoyed GMing one-shots this last 12 months, partly because my availability has been a bit sketchy, but not just here as part of our shared hearth or Star Wars Saturday celebration events, but also face-to-face at Aircon in Harrogate. I had a great time there back in March, particularly running Alien Dark with a group of players as Colonial Marines. That is really proving to be great fun. And also a one-shot of the cluster. First time I'd run that as a one-shot, and that went quite well. So I did consider at one point making one-shots in general my Game of the Year, but nah. If I therefore seriously consider my GM perspective, Rapscallion, the game I wanted to love so much, but needs a second edition, needs to be just tidied up a bit around the edges, even though we've only just got it. And so I kind of boil it down to Alien Dark, which I love running. It's partly to do with Alien Earth being about and the whole alien resurrection. We got Predator Badlands and the connection being made at the minute. So that, I think, is probably going to be my candidate for, or is it? It's difficult because I've really enjoyed running Grimwild for my home group. And I think I must put it on the calendar here in the new year. It scratched an itch I didn't know I had from the late 70s playing D&D and running D&D. So Is it going to be Star Trek Adventures, USS Kintsugi, Commander Latal from a player perspective, or Grimwild from a GM perspective? I think for reasons of nostalgia, and I think it's quite clever, some of the systems and mechanics in it, my game of the year this year is going to be Grimwild, because I can see me running that for quite a long while yet. Thank you.
Hello and Happy New Year, Open Hearth. This is Jex Thomas from Last Pine Press, and while there were 2 contenders for my Game of the Year, you can hear me talk about one of them on Around the Hearth. So the game I'm going to tell you about today is Exile by Emma Acosta and published by MythWorks. This is a game I've been watching the development of for a few years now and have been eagerly awaiting its completion. Well, I finally got to hold it in my hands, and it is a beauty. Exile is a sort of companion game to Crescent 2E, which is about a group of children who have wandered into the daydream. Exile, on the other hand, is about angsty teenage misfits trying to crawl their way out of the below, a nightmarish hell world full of tarnished souls. If the pitch alone doesn't get you on board, it's full of excellent art and innovative mechanics that take the fiction-forward design of Forged in the Dark and marry it with OSR-like sensibilities. It is a game about escaping hell and returning to some semblance of a life worth living. Maybe that feels a bit on the nose right now, but at the same time, it is exactly my kind of shit. And did I mention that the book is absolutely gorgeous? Check it out.
Hi, Open Hearth. I'm Nat Knight, and my 2025 Game of the Year is Blood Feud by Alf Peter Malmberg and Amos Johan Persson. Blood Feud is a GM-less game about honor, power, and toxic masculinity where you play Vikings in pre-Christian Scandinavia. Now, this game is obviously doing stuff with gender and binaries and patterns of violence and oppression, so if that's not for you, definitely skip this one. But if that's something you're interested in exploring thoughtfully, this game goes hard. During setup, each player creates a Viking man to be their primary character. You create the settlement they live in and the women who are attached to them, wives, relatives, etc. Once that's all established, play goes in scenes where you're competing to gain honor by making moves like give someone a gift, or insult someone, or comment on a woman's appearance. It's lightly competitive, but the point is really the drama and the way quote-unquote masculine expectations drive characters towards conflict and violence. One of the moves you can make during a confrontation is strike a deadly blow, which just kills another character. No dice, no tactics, they're just dead. Death is only ever a breath away, and let me tell you, that sure puts an edge on the drama. Another rule is that you need a woman present in every scene to perform your masculinity for. If the last woman leaves, the scene ends immediately. This is a pretty small game. The rulebook is 64 pages, including illustrations, character sheets, advice on facilitation and safety, text to read aloud during setup and the teach. It's thorough, but definitely not bloated, which I really appreciate. If any of that piques your interest, do check out Blood Feud, published by Blackfisk Publishing.
Hello, dear Open Hearth Fellowship. Here is Gerrit Reininghaus, and I'm glad to be back on the Game of the Year episode of the Open Hearth podcast. So my Game of the Year is Pizza Box. Pizza Box is a game in which you use a pizza box and you throw a coin into it and you see where the coin lands and you scribble like a circle or some other shape around the coin and write something in it, and that is a prompt. And next time somebody throws a coin and they land in your area, they have to follow that prompt. And if they land anywhere else, they can define their own prompt and scribble something like a new area until the whole pizza box floor is full of little prompts from which you can improvise and have a wonderful full session of fun and good and joyful roleplay, hopefully. Enjoy Pizza Box. I love it a lot. And yeah, thanks for everybody who brought Pizza Box into my life.
Hi, it's me, Lloyd. I'm never around much these days because I'm too busy pretending to be awesome and failing miserably. But I need to tell you what my favorite game of the year is, and it's very important you listen to me now. Okay, now hold up. Now, if you told me that Critical Role were going to make a D&D-esque role-playing game where you're all going to be, it's just going to be perfect for streamers, and it's going to be exactly what you think on the TV, I'd have told you were lying to my face, and you could kiss my black ass. And when I started to play Daggerheart, I generally was like, I'm going to hate this. I don't know what I'm doing here. This is so not my cup of tea. And 30 minutes in, I had already bought a copy. I cannot believe the words coming out of my mouth, but Daggerheart completely surprised me this year. We've had so many D&D-esque games. We had Draw Steel, we had Cosmere, we had Nimble Fifth Ed, if you want to put it down there. We have Vagabond. We have so many games coming out that are trying to get in on that D&D space on Lookout, but none of them gave me the same feel of adventure as Daggerheart did. I think they did a really great job in mixing both narrativeness with what is considered like the normal norms of a D&D game. Yes, armor is complicated and weird without like 1 hit or 3 hits, but who freaking cares? It's all about how cinematic it looks. Yes, it doesn't really have a straight initiative system. Fine, I get it, but it still works as a system that just flows. And more importantly, if your GM is very good at spotlighting and also using an economy, such as the fear economy and the hope economy, to both tell a story and move it around, it shines like gold. And gold is so rare in a role-playing industry, I have to stop whatever I'm doing and put my foot down to say I think Daggerheart is the game of the year for me this year. Thank you very much for listening. I'll disappear now. Goodbye.
Hello, I'm Michele, and I've been playing with the Open Hearth for a couple of years now. Before getting to my game of the year, I'd like to mention the wonderful campaign of Mythic Bastionland I've been playing in. Switching from play-by-post to live play, it's been really engaging and rewarding. But I'll say no more, because I'm sure you'll hear a lot about this game. Instead, between the very few games that I've managed to run this year, I'll pick a game that is not specifically crazy in itself, but I hope it will sparkle your imagination and will give you a different take on what you can do with role-playing. So the game is Anamnesis by Samantha League, and it's a very short journaling game, which is supposed to be a solo game. I set up a session for 3 players, myself included, and it worked pretty well. So the game is about memory loss and self-discovery. As you draw cards from a tarot deck, you answer prompts about details of yourself, or your surroundings, your past life, etc. And you use the major arcana to shape your answer in whatever way you wish. I personally let myself be inspired by the pictures, while another player used the meaning of those cards to come up with interesting answers. In our case, we collectively told the story of this person waking up in a ditch on the side of the road with no memory, wearing a dinner suit, and we took turns answering questions and discovering things about our navy tattoos, a locket in our pocket, and our childhood photograph with our parents in a garden. And then, as we walked around the road, we rediscovered the familiar smell of our hometown, the Christmas market, the old record player at our parents' house. It was a cozy, occasionally sentimental and mysterious session in which we painted a captivating sketch of a person who had forgotten themselves. So I hope you too have played some great games in 2025, and I'll see you around.
Hi, I'm Guy Milner, or Burn After Running on the Discord and on my blog. My game of the year for Open Hearth 2025 is a hack of Good Society, a one-shot session of You Must Leave This Party Alone that I played during Shared Hearth that was facilitated by Wyllora. You Must Leave This Party Alone takes a really great one-shot concept for Good Society. It's the last party of the season. Your main characters just need to avoid receiving a proposal. And as you generate those main characters, just like in Good Society, you also generate the minor characters who all they want to do is try and get engaged with you. All they have really is a few words of description and then what they will use to attempt to win their suitor. From our game, these included entangling her intended in an elaborate parlour game and unveil increasingly exotic animals to impress them. That gives you a bit of a flavour for the level of gonzo that we went for, and we were all pretty much on the same page. It was an absolute scream for 3 hours, this. Why was it so good? The first thing is the system really distilled down to what it works with. Good Society is great, but I find it a bit baroque in a one-shot. The phases are a little bit much, and I never quite get into the rhythm of what I should be doing at each stage. This boiled-down version, where each character just gets a scene with a suitor that's trying to win them, worked really, really well. And I think we all knew what the rhythm was and what was coming up to it. And the second thing was really excellent facilitation. We had a great group of players, but that doesn't happen by chance. And you don't get a game like this without really thinking about it. Pace kept tripping along. And Wyllora did a really cool thing where we rolled randomly for which suitor was in the scene and also what their previous relationship with as was. And each scene we'd swap who was playing these minor characters, these suitors, which could have been a bit off-putting, but actually meant it was really good. We got to see several different versions of each of the suitors from different players and see us build on each other's actions. A really great example of what narrative type games, for want of a better word, can achieve when everyone's just riffing off one another and you're at the end of sort of that bit of improv and gameplay intersect. So I just recommend, if anyone hasn't managed to get onto Shared Hearth yet, it's a really great opportunity to play some one-shots like this and to meet some new players and to find maybe a game that you wouldn't have played with before. So check it out.
Hi, this is Rich, former host of Plus One Forward podcast, now just a player and a GM for the Open Hearth. 2025 was a pretty big year for me. It was the 10th year in a row that I completed the Ladder of Insanity, which is a game challenge on RPG Geek, where you have to play 10 different RPGs, 10 sessions each. That's 100 sessions. And I did 10 years of it. 10, all the way down. It was also the year that I played my 100th different RPG system set in Star Wars, part of Star Wars Saturdays, which I've been doing for 8 years. And I hit the 500th session played of a Star Wars Saturdays game. Wow, long in the tooth. I also brought my 3-year-long home game of X-Men Academy, masks mostly game, brought that to a close. It was almost Game of the Year, the thing I used for our epilogue, which was a hack of Before the Storm, based off the hack Before the End game that Lowell did. Thank you, Lowell, for sharing your notes with me. But it's not the Game of the Year for me. The Game of the Year for me is a bit of a journey. In 2011, I played in a play-by-post game on Mythweavers. That's where I met someone named Adam Minnie. Adam played Mopsa, Mop Mullet. I played Lillian Westwick. And the game that we played was challenging to play over play-by-post because it was pretty complex. But Adam was a huge fan of Cortex. He was super giving as a player. He helped me realize aspects of the system. Our scenes always cooked, and it was a thrill to write with him and play. I found the game itself to be a little frustrating at times because at the time, this is 2011, Rich, I had a more conventional RPG mindset, and if you lost a conflict, I expected that you would have to change your mind. But in this game, you never had to if you didn't want to. If you felt your character felt strongly, you just took fallout from it. And that frustrated me because why go into conflict if you can't win? Was my mindset. And it stayed that way for quite a while. We played on Mythweavers for 15 months or so, moved to another site for a few months with a new GM. Adam and I were still having fun, but the game faded. So Adam and I moved on to other games, and we kept in touch. He introduced me to Heidi and Kelsey, and we all played some great play-by-post games together. Fast forward to 2019. My job transfers me to the Twin Cities, Minnesota. That's where Adam and Kelsey and Heidi all live. Heidi introduced me to her husband, Zach, and we all started a gaming group together. Jesse Ross, creator of Trophy Dark and other awesome games, joined the group, and we've been playing together for quite a while. When Jesse pitched to us a desire to run this year a game called Smallville, I looked at Adam. Adam is a huge Cortex fan. I mentioned that before, right? He's huge fan. He worked on Marvel Heroic on the ill-fated and never-released Age of Apocalypse supplement. He was also the one who helped me with Smallville way back in the day in 2011, 2012. He was so excited to play Smallville. So I put my old annoyances to the side and told Jesse it sounded like fun. It was more than fun. It was my game of the year. Smallville is brilliant in so many ways, and if you want to hear me bloviate on that, check out an upcoming Roll for Origin episode, which I'll be recording as a guest host with the amazing Mad J and awesome Lowell in a few days. Our Smallville series was set in a DC continuity in Palmyra City. That's the home of the Blue Beetle movie. We fought Calendar Man and the Condiment King. That was a granting of a wish that I made, because I've always wanted to see the Condiment King in a game session, and it was great. We attended a charity wrestling match where Lizardmen showed up. The system pushed us into new directions and unexpected outcomes. The game was exhilarating, and it was such a delight that I had to make Smallville my game of the year. After playing a ton of indie games over the last 14 years, coming back to Smallville and realizing the brilliance of how you don't always get to change someone's mind, but the game rewards you for trying, for pushing against someone else's beliefs, for pushing and stretching and changing your own beliefs, choosing to do so. That's where I was missing it before, and that's where I finally got it this time. Oh, yeah, and also Jesse helped fix the experience advancement system, because that super annoyed me, and it always will. I'm going to die hating that. Sorry. Smallville was my game of the year. I had a great time with it. I don't know if it's a game I could run. Definitely not a game I could easily run online. Gosh, I want to play some more of it, though.
And we're back with another set of Dynamite choices. And it's my turn to hog the stage here for a little bit.
You've played a lot of games this year.
Yeah, though I did a lot more long quarterly play, so the actual number of different games is nothing like Dunna's or that kind of thing. I will say, if you hadn't said Die, I would put Die on my list, but my runner-ups have to be Rapscallion.
Oh, yeah.
Surprisingly to me, it's a fantasy, beautiful mess. I think there's a lot of problems with the system, and yet playing a really high fantasy, weird fantasy pirate game has just been a joy, and playing it super fast. So we do a lot of things in each session. We move the story forward a lot, and I love fantasy. And this has rekindled that for me. And I think for Tyler as well, we've talked about doing some more tri-fantasy from that. The other one that I will mention is Star Trek Adventures. Like the other runners-up, I've mentioned it before, but this year was a great year for running classic Star Trek Next Generation and some original series stuff, and getting into the groove of running games like TV shows and really leaning into that and getting a group of players who've been willing to do that. And all of those sessions were really, really dynamite. But this is a weird choice. My game of the year is one session that I played that has since been adapted. Back in May, for our Star Wars Minicon, I did a thing where we kind of, as a writer's room, did hey, what if there was a new trilogy, after the Star Wars Empire, Return of the Jedi trilogy? And I kind of came up with some sketchy rules for that. And that play of that, and I've talked about it on the podcast before, was so satisfying. And Ondish has taken that and has created a much more robust, structured system for it that still allows for that open play, and has used it in a remarkable set of genres. And I loved the game that we played, and I loved looking and watching other people then Ondish iterating on it, and other people then playing it in a whole bunch of different ways. And I love that. That is what I want out of games, is all of us sharing working together, building each other things, and getting great new experiences
It
out of
is a
that.
kind of joy that is incredible. It's impossible to describe until you've been part of it.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love. I love about this community, that sharing that goes on. And listeners, we're going to go into our third and final segment, and then I'm going to come and give some words at the end.
Hi, this is Sina. I've been part of the Open Hearth since autumn 2024, I think, but I've been a lot more active in the last few months or so. So I thought this might be a nice time to take part in this lovely community podcast. And yeah, since I'm really, really bad at making decisions, I've got a few picks in, I guess, 3 different categories. My first category is, a game that I got to just play in, and that would be Apocalypse Keys. It's an ongoing campaign. I think it used to be a quarterly, and now it's kind of a half yearly or more than that. And I feel really privileged to have been able to join that. It's run by Dominik, and I got to play with a very short few sessions with Kieron, and then otherwise with Shane and Teast. And it's the very first longer campaign that I got to play, and that's just, just a lot more rewarding, I guess, or not. It's just a different flavor from the one-shots that I got to play in before. And my second pick is the very first game that I finally felt confident enough to run, which is Public Access. I'm running a campaign of that now, off Hearth, I guess. But I've been very, very anxious about GMing in general. And so I will be forever grateful for a game that makes me feel like, yeah, maybe you can do that. And so far, we're having good fun. And then the third pick is Lovecraft-esque, because it is the game that actually got me to join the Open Hearth, since, Dominik very generously offered to run a game for me when I was, intrigued by the game. And I just feel really lucky to have joined such a welcoming and friendly community, and that I get to learn about so many more cool and interesting games. So I'm wishing everyone a lovely rest of the year. And that's it. Bye.
Hello, this is Thomas Manuel, writer of the Indie RPG newsletter and journalist at Rascal News. This year was a tough one for me. I had 3 or 4 games that I think could easily have been Game of the Year. I played a lot of Last Train to Bremen. I played that 5 times, I think, with 5 different groups. As a one-shot, I was just kind of introducing it to everyone I knew. I introduced it to my colleagues. I introduced it to my home game group. I introduced it to my partner and some other friends. If you haven't tried Caro Cercion's game of Musicians Who Made a Deal with the Devil, it's very fun. You should check it out. I also had 2 amazing campaigns of Impossible Landscapes and Harvest, both of which got substantial write-ups on Rascal. Impossible Landscapes is an adventure for Delta Green. There's a great Twins Quest review of it. I ran it with the sort of modified version of Occultations by Shane, who's a member of the community. And Harvest is a game designed by Luke Jordan of Wildwoods Games, published by Possum Creek / Steve Jackson Games. It's a game about a idyllic island and the blood sacrifice that ensures it stays a paradise. If you want to read about me kind of having a supernatural experience with Impossible Landscapes, you can go read about that. I had 4,000 words about it. When I wrote about Harvest, I called it probably my Game of the Year. I think I had a really special campaign of it. I'm absolutely not a fan of outside belonging games normally, but this one just had such a strong premise. Folk horror is such a good generator of atmosphere, and the game's structure and beautiful prose, and the climax that it facilitates. Personally, my table sort of like killed it, if you pardon the pun. I'll never know if your games will hit that same twisty, heartbreaking, climactic moment, but I hope so, and I want that for you.
Hi, my name is Gabe, and I ran several really fun campaigns this year, but for my game of the year, I'm going to go with Mythic Bastionland, because I've been playing for over a year, since 2024, in a game run by Horst with Michele, Will, Dominik, and several other like recurring or guest people. So shout out to all those people. It's been really fun. And for me, what is really cool about Mythic Bastionland, and I'm sure a lot of this has to do with Horst's GMing, but I think that like in our campaign, we've been able to go in very deep into like the political side of things. And there's a great thematic richness to these questions of like power and authority and violence, and what is the point of being the only person to follow your vows in a world filled with people who only pay lip service to them? And so, even though it's all kind of an emergent narrative, no one knows where anything's going to go, looking back on some of the events that have happened, it's easy to kind of draw out some of these themes. It's a really interesting story, and it's the kind of story that I think tabletop role-playing games are best at telling, because you get some really interesting stories in that kind of chaotic mess that unfolds at the table. And so I think, Chris McDowell's rules and, of course, Horst's awesome jamming have created a pretty unforgettable story for me. So that's my pick.
Hey, everybody. This is Will S., and my game of the year was somewhat inevitable, as in the last 12 months, I've played in 3 different games of it, run by 3 different people, and run 3 games of it myself on the Open Hearth, including my first ever monthly and first ever quarterly. That's right, it's Triangle Agency. In Triangle Agency, you play as field agents of a sinister, privately held corporation with a mandate to capture and study anomalous entities whose existence may threaten reality. Did I mention the field agents themselves are anomalous? That sure sounds like a conflict of interest. What appears at first to be a relatively straightforward monster of the week style affair slowly, session over session, builds into a meditation on community building, surveillance capitalism, and the resistance of the exploited, the weird, the marginalized, the monstrous. First of all, the rulebook is a work of art, and has been living in my head rent-free since the first moment I leafed through it. If you don't think this game is going to hit the table for you anytime soon, I urge you to make whatever peace you need with the spoiler gods, and take a look at the GM section, behind the player-facing guide. Maybe peek a little bit into the unlockable playwall while you're at it. This is a book filled with big, ambitious ideas, and it swings for the fences. As for how the game works in practice, oh boy, well, it's messy for a story game. There are a lot of levers for the GM to keep an eye on, and plenty for the players to track as well. And this only increases over time, as with character advancement, players open up pieces of the unlockable playwall, much like a legacy board game, gaining reality warping abilities and learning terrible truths. Will this push characters into ideological conflict? Could players discover that they're not playing the game they thought they were playing anymore, or that they might not be comfortable with? Yes, all of the above. And if you decide to play Triangle Agency, I recommend meeting it where your players and table are at. Use safety tools and check in with your players early and often. Make sure everyone's still enjoying the vibe. This is a game that, rules as written, asks a lot from its players, both in terms of number of sessions and mechanical buy-in, and I'm looking forward to seeing how people adapt it to the Open Hearth culture of play. In the meantime, I will fondly remember Elliot's Quarterly from January, featuring Wyllora and Marc's Plural. I'll always make time for a coffee date in the gazebo at Fortune Park, at the end of the yellow brick path. Hit me up.
Hi, This is Michael D, also known as K-pop and RPGs, and I'm going to tell you about my game of the year. I've chosen a very well-known game that honestly has been on my shortlist for quite a while, Yazeba's Bed and Breakfast. In previous years, I was hesitant to choose it because I was sure other people were going to talk about it, and I wanted to highlight other games instead. However, in 2025, I have been interacting with Yazeba's much more than before. First of all, I've read all the fiction within the book. I've played in many sessions and facilitated a bunch myself, within the community, but also for my local friend group, or strangers at conventions, and it was always a great time. There was even a time when I was cursed because of the game. You see, I was too nosy. I've opened the forbidden envelope that comes with the game, and that curse impacted the way I played the game quite significantly until I got rid of it. So don't repeat my mistake, dear listener. Or do, because it was kind of fun. Oh, and I also wrote a character that originated from a session run by Casey, Mabel Smith, a heartbroken imaginary girlfriend from Canada. You can find her at my itch.io page. That all being said, I still have not played or read it all. There's so much more for me to discover, and I'm really looking forward to that. Lastly, I want to say that playing Yazeba's with the Open Hearth community has been a highlight of my gaming this year. I've played Yazeba's with some regulars who I love to spend time with, as well as some people new to the game who I haven't met before. I was really lucky to be in one session run by Casey that was really meaningful because a beloved character left the bed and breakfast. And that got some of us quite emotional. Together we reflected afterwards on what this game means to us during these dark times. And we agreed that it provides us with community and a space to be vulnerable, because at Yazeba's Bed and Breakfast, there's always room for everyone.
Hey, Dom here, and my game of the year for 2025 would have to be Cats of Cthulhu by George Sparks. Cats of Cthulhu is essentially Call of Cthulhu, but instead of playing investigators, you play as cats. I've personally always been a fan of media where animals take center stage as the protagonist, and I cannot lie and say that the Craftian/cosmic horror isn't my preferred genre of horror. So the combination of the two is just chef's kiss to me. While it might not sound like much, one of the aspects that really drove me into the game is just how much you can modify its setting. By default, the game puts the player cats as cultists of the Eldritch cat god of the setting. Pretty much all of the old ones and outer gods of the Cthulhu mythos have been replaced by animal gods. And the base goal of the player cats is to ensure that their god's dominion reigns supreme, whilst thwarting the efforts of the other animal gods and their cults. And right off the bat, that is interesting, since in most of crafting games, players play as the forces that oppose the cultists in general, while here you add one. Now you can always change that, so that the player cats are just that, ordinary cats that stumbled into Lovecraftian mysteries instead of being cultists. And you can always replace the animal gods with the actual gods from the Cthulhu mythos, if not even just create your own gods in Cthulhu, your own Lovecraftian gods. This modifying can also extend to the tone of the game, where most Lovecraftian games are serious. Cats of Cthulhu can vary from table to table. By default, the game is pretty lighthearted as you're playing cats. In something like Call of Cthulhu, if a character spots an ancient Eldritch relic on a desk, they might stand it, while in Cats of Cthulhu, the cats might just knock it off the desk without further exploration. Depending on the mood at the table, you can pretty much run Cats of Cthulhu almost like a horror comedy, but you can also run it like a serious game as well. but the mood does bring me to two disclaimers I would give to people with the game. Disclaimer A is I usually run Cards of Cthulhu as a mix of lightheartedness and a more typical serious Lovecraftian horror game, which I assume is how most people are going to run it as well. And due to that, I found that the game can have a tonal whiplash as it goes from almost comedy-esque, a scene of a typical cat shenanigans, to full-on really messed up horror happenings in the same scene. And that can be a bit jarring to folk if it is not communicated well before the game. Disclaimer B, the game puts a big emphasis on playing the dead cats as cats. By that I mean is that the dead cats do not have the same understanding of the world as humans do. For example, a cat does not understand how a card works. They just know that it is a thing that a human gets into to take them far away in a short span of time. A card does not know that it is the engine that powers the card, or even what an engine is. In my experience, this can be awkward roleplay to some players, and much like the tone should be discussed with the table before the game begins to ensure a fun and smooth experience for everyone involved. TLDR, Cards of Cthulhu is a great game if you're looking to play as animals in horror scenarios, and I highly recommend it to anyone.
Hi, I'm Shane, and my favourite game of 2026 was Oddfolk by Max Lander. I played it in a one-shot that Danny ran at Shared Hearth and had such a great time that I pretty quickly put it on the calendar myself and got to run a one-shot just the other week. The basic mechanic of this game is built around moves that trigger when you attempt certain actions, a bit like a Powered by the Apocalypse game. So you might weasel and skulk, you might analyse risk, lots of different things. There are options to sort of substitute different moves depending on the genre that you're playing in. It's pitched as a modular game. Each move is made up of a pick list of 4 options, and when you make the move, you roll a d4, and whatever you roll, you take that many options from the list. So generally, one of the options will mean succeeding, and because you can't roll less than a 1, you always at least have the option to succeed. You might decide that something else is more exciting, but you're never sort of forced to fail. The other options can be good or bad, so depending what you rolled, you often have to choose between complications or drawbacks, ranging from, pretty ordinary things like you take damage to more strange and playful things, like now you have a goblin admirer following you around. When you roll a 4, you're not choosing anymore, you're just obliged to take all the options, which can get pretty interesting. It's a really fun and simple mechanic, and the game gets a lot of mileage out of it. I personally really like a lot of fantasy modules, but often not really the systems that they're designed for, and this really hit the sweet spot for me of what I want in a fantasy adventure game. It's not dark, it's not crunchy, it's playful and joyful and full of surprises, and that's what I want from an elf game. I also found that the move format, the sort of constraint that it provides, is a really fun way to create new content, a little game design challenge that was really satisfying. You always have to have 4 options. They can't contradict each other because someone might have to take all 4. They can't really build on each other because you might not be able to take more than 1. But within that constraint, there's lots of different things you can do. I enjoyed using it to sort of tempt the players. I let them know early in the module that they should be worried about a golden beetle, and then one of the moves had an option you could choose where you noticed a golden beetle appear. Of course, there is no player on the Open Hearth who could resist that temptation, so we got right into it. Another move, the players could choose to have the villain taunt them as one of their pick list options. That's probably better than the other options where it causes damage or other kinds of mechanical disadvantage. So I had the players constantly asking me for the villain to taunt them. What more could a GM want? I really enjoyed this, obviously. I've been thinking about trying to run a whole Hexcrawl campaign next year. So yes, I've been writing overland travel moves, some downtime moves. I think it's going to be really great.
Hello, everyone. This is Amanda, aka I Am a T-Rex. I got to play a ton of fun games this year, and I can't possibly choose a favorite. So instead, I'm going to talk about one of my go-to convention games. Numbskulls by Caden Ramstack is a single-player tabletop game for a GM and 2 or more players. It's rules light and fail positive. And in this game, you play skeletons in service to a necromancer in a slapstick, silly world where necromancy is forbidden. When I run this game, I typically task the skeletons with some silly thing like creating a parade float, entering a baking competition, or planning a Sweet 16 party. The skeletons then have to interact with the human world, pretending to be human to get their task done. There are 3 stats: physical, magical, social. It's pretty self-explanatory. Each starts with a success range of 7 to 8 on a 2d6 roll, and the players can distribute 5 points to expand those ranges as is appropriate for their skeleton character. The real highlight of this game, aside from how silly and fun it is at the table, is the character sheet. It comes with a tombstone and a skeleton that you can decorate and draw on, so you can illustrate what your skeleton's disguise looks like. It's super cute. You can get numbskulls from kramstack.itch.io, that is k-ramstack.itch.io, and I really hope it tickles your funny bone.
Hi, this is Donna to talk about my favorite RPG of 2025. I played over 70 different RPGs this year, and picking just one favorite is as difficult as ever. Some honorable mentions: as a one-shot, Going for Broke by Avery Older. Short sessions make this sitcom game a winner, and it works great in snappy campaign mode too. In a campaign, 2 Summers by Marchant, with a great structure to keep 2 timelines spinning without feeling painted into a corner. As a duet, Follow Me Down by Joy Martin, a well-stocked underworld of tragedy and heartbreak for Orpheus and Eurydice. As a solo game, Don't Play This Game by Charlie and Barney Menzies. The great prompts and full-blown sense of unease made this great to play. Now I just have to pass the curse on. But this year, my game of the year was Star Trek Adventures 2nd Edition by Modifius. So yes, having a pretty trad game as my game of the year is one of those "say you've been kidnapped" without saying you've been kidnapped messages. The 2nd edition solves a lot of the gripes I had with the 1st edition, and while there's still a good bit of crunch, it's a lot less painful with more streamlined dice and tactical ship combat systems. What I like about the system is the fact that rookie, experienced, or veteran characters are all fun to play. While they are more or less mechanically equivalent, they still definitely have that distinctive flavor. The ability to quickly create and pick up a side character is great also, and we've loved seeing these develop over time. Definitely solves the challenge of not sending the entire command staff on every away mission just because. And most importantly, every session of this game feels so much like an episode of Star Trek. It's a real rush to play. So that's my game of the year. Really looking forward to hearing what other people have as usual, and have a good one.
Hey, Kat here, and my game of the year is Triangle Agency, which is very easy to guess if you've talked to me at all in the past 6 months. Triangle Agency single-handedly took over my gaming schedule in 2025. I'm the type of person that gets really into the characters of a game, so Triangle Agency has been like catnip to me. In between sessions, you decide what your character spent time doing, and these choices unlock different sections of the game's playwall. You can discover new rules, lore, and abilities depending on which part of the game you interact with. Your fellow players will be doing the same thing. So not only do I get to be excited about what my character discovers, but I get to witness my fellow players' choices, and see how that affects our story as a whole. Being involved in other players' stories is further encouraged by having players also portray major connections in their character's life, which is something I think more games should employ. It gives players more playtime, gets others invested in your story, and takes some responsibility off the GM's plate. On paper, Triangle Agency portrays a world that's very clear-cut. In the playwall, there's 3 paths. Stick to your office job and get bonuses that make you more efficient. Understand your powers and become something more than human. Stay close to your connections and learn how to protect them from yourself. At the beginning of the book, it tells you the only way to win Triangle Agency is by playing the agency's in-game rules, and that sacrificing yourself and your relationships for the sake of the entire universe is a simple and uncomplicated choice. But in the same breath, we'll suggest creative ways to break those rules. Metaphorically, it reminds us there's always another choice than what those in power offer. And the choices that you make in Triangle Agency, while there are difficult moral decisions and unethical powers at play, most of the time, the choices are downright hysterical. I've never played a game that makes me more excited to fail a roll. The powers that each character has are so specific, and the failure conditions even more so. There's a lot of discussions in the TTRPG play culture about failing forward and mixed beats, but frankly, there's nothing like rolling to clone yourself, failing, and now having to deal with an evil clone on top of everything else you got going on. The more you roll, the more power you're giving your GM to make moves against you, and these moves don't even have to be for combat reasons. It can also further entangle your character by triggering something from their regular life outside of this supernatural corporate job. Imagine you're investigating an extra-dimensional horror show, and then your therapist just shows up. It's both the worst and funniest thing that could happen.
Hello, my name is David MK, he, him pronouns. My game of the year for 2025 selection includes 3 co-selections. The first is Stone Top, an unreleased game by Jason Lutz and Jeremy Sternberg. It's a hearth fantasy TTRPG set in an Iron Age that never was. It surprised me with its focus on home, community, and the strange world just beyond the village firelight. It framed play as building and defending that community start to finish through tough, mechanic-backed choices. I loved how its systems fed directly into emergent stories, and I'll remember it as my favorite fantasy game. My second co-selection is Apocalypse World Burned Over by Megway and Vincent Baker. Particularly using my Starfall Hard Zone creation, it dives into communities surviving a post-alien war and failed xenoforming of Earth. The Baker's decision to return to Burned Over as the next edition of AW pulled me back too. Thank you, playtesters, for coming with me into this weird setting that keeps giving me life. This is an apocalypse where found communities spark real hope. My third and final co-selection is Escapes by Jim Crocker. It's been one of my choices before and remains my favorite Supers TTRPG. It's a Powered by the Apocalypse game based on The Between by Jason Cordova. Escapes, the tabletop RPG of retired supers where you play to find out what happened back then, and the risks you'll take as you get dragged back into that life. The game strongly supports this push and pull nature, and our group committed to finish the series after several delays because we loved the shared super story and needed to see it through. If this sounds like your kind of supers game, find a copy on itch.io by Jim Likes Games today.
Hello, my name is Bez. I'm an agender and transmasculine GM. And the game I would like to nominate for my TTRPG Game of the Year is a game called Chapter Dungeon Crawler TTRPG. Now, Chapter is a game where players are authors who are exploring a magical library. The land of the game is called Grapheme, and within this land, libraries were created to contain all of magic by an organization called the Scribes. I chose this game to run because I run games in the Eternal Tabletop Role-Playing Game Jam server. I run games that people make for the Jam, and this was made for the Libraries and Guides edition of the Eternal Jam. I chose Chapter to run as my first campaign. I have 2 players who are wonderful. They play characters named Nessa and Cadenza, who are both ardent and very eager explorers of libraries, who have almost gotten trapped in libraries before. Oh, did I mention that you can get trapped in a library if you stay too long? Don't let the magic entice you too much, or you're going to become one of the stories on the shelves. With this framework of a story, I've chosen to tell a tale of gods trapped in the library who need the help of godchildren, who are the player characters, to get them out. And I am very proud with how the story is going. I love playing this game every time I sit down at the table, and it's just a fantastic project. The library tiles, which form the random rooms that you can find in the library, are evocative and give me plenty to work with. I'm the type of GM who loves improv on the fly, so I don't need a lot to work with, and I can take something and weave something out of it, even if it's just a few words. And Chapter is the perfect game for me because of that. The library tiles have things like malice and the seamstress and stuff like that, along with the mechanical implications of what they can do. I use that to create an experience for my players, and I love doing it. There are 2 stats in the game, body and mind, and the goal of the game is to roll under. You cannot beats it in this game. If you meet it, you do not, in fact, beat it in Chapter. So the goal of the game is to roll under your body or mind stat. I can use body or mind to cover a wide variety of checks and rolls, There are two types of rolls. For a test, you roll multiple dice, and if one passes, you succeed the test. For a challenge, you roll multiple dice, but all the dice have to pass in order for you to pass a challenge. The checks are very simple. The stats are very simple, but it all really works splendidly. I think it allows for a wide variety of checks and a wide variety of things you can do. I would highly recommend you play Chapter for yourself. Give it a read. And thank you for listening about my game of the year.
Hi everyone, my name is Jose, and my game of the year for 2026 is a run of Girl by Moonlight. This is a game about magical youngsters resisting an oppressive society. It's a Forged in the Dark game, which historically have been kind of hard games for me. I've struggled a bit finding my role-playing voice within the structure of Forged in the Dark games. But this game really called my attention because it was set in a Castlevania setting and it had this theme of the magical youngsters, which was really evocative for me. And so I thought I would give it a try, even though I'd had challenges with Forged in the Dark in the past. And thanks to the infinite patience of our GM Clarice and my fellow players Fumi, Danny, and Dom, I managed to find my way through this game, and it felt like a triumph for me. There was a lot of persistent confusion, but with the support of my fellow players, I managed. And more than managed. Together with my fellow players, we managed to create a collaborative story that was really captivating. It was always surprising, unexpected things were happening, and I felt like there was a lot of leeway within this particular game to express my playstyle, to roleplay more fully, and to really engage with the relationships between the PCs, which is something that I have a lot of fun with. The game itself is focused on relationships and community, which offered me the in I needed to do the kinds of things I wanted to do in the game. For instance, there's a promise mechanic where you create promises in character creation between your characters, between your PCs, that color and shape the kinds of relationships you have with your PCs throughout the game. It was also my first time playing a time traveler, which can be kind of challenging and tricksy, getting into the timey-wimey stuff, but it was also very rewarding for me. My character came from the past rather than the future, from medieval Spain in this case, and it really inspired me to deepen my knowledge of that period in Spain and the wonders of Al-Andalus. I can honestly say that it infiltrated my dreams in lovely ways and still has been capturing my imagination. Thanks again to everyone who made it possible.
And that was the last segment, except for this little bit at the end. I want to thank everyone who contributed to this. It's so gratifying for everyone to come and submit these and to get such a wild variety of games. A few things that you'll have heard overlapped, but a lot of new, interesting, and novel games. All of this is really due to the community. This is community supported both by coming up with ideas and supporting it on our Discord, and of course, this is supported by Patreon. This is where I'll give a shout out that, hey, if you like these podcasts, please support us on Patreon. We can do these things each year because of that. Brings me to thanking our editors for this episode, Ethan, Rich, and Rob. And then the other person who's a key focal point for the Open Hearth podcast editing is Brushman. Those people make this happen. I also do editing, and that's on our Roll 4 episodes and some of the Open Hearth and some of our talks. And then also Ian does editing for a different kind of hex. So all of those editors, I just want to thank them. If you're listening to this, hey, we've got a bunch of great stuff coming up in this coming new year. We've got episodes for a different kind of hex with Karen 12s and with Shane. We've got episodes of Roll for Mutation that is looking at Apocalypse World and Tank Girl. and the Wizards Ralph Bakshi game. We've got Roll for Origin doing Aberrant, and then the Marvel and Smallville games. We've also got a number of talks that we gave that we've got in the pipeline to put out there. We've got an episode on doing cities and campaigns. We've got an episode on doing long campaigns. We've got an episode on adapting modules. So all of those things, you're going to see that rolling out here at the beginning of 2026. And the next episode of Open Hearth features Kieron Gillan and Kat Rambo, which we've already kind of got set to go. So all those things are coming up. And again, like if you dig it, help us out. Share it, support it, all of those kinds of things. And so, Sherri, anything you want to say last?
You know, it's a gorgeous time to be part of this hobby. If you get a chance, come and play. If you're not sure, come and play. Just give it a try because it's such a joy when you're in that group, in that groove, and all of you are making something really special happen. It's such a magical thing.
And I will say last word, I want to give my personal thanks to the community. You got me through an incredibly weird year of strangeness, as everybody knows, with the world. First year I got death threats for the community, and this is also the year that YouTube decided to take down my channel for a month and screw up all my playlists and finally reinstate it with no explanation. So people helped me get through that in the community, and I have to thank everyone who has been a part of that. So this is a production of the Open Hearth Gaming Community. I'll have links in the show notes for lots of things, so check those out. And listeners, that is, at long last, our show.